What's the difference between these two phrasal verbs? Would you be able to use them in sentences? How many meanings of these phrasal verbs do you know? I'm Magic and this is Verb It Up, a video series where you'll learn all you need to know about phrasal verbs in English. Today we'll be looking at 10 common phrasal verbs at the B2 and the C1 level. There'll be exercises for you to practice these verbs in their natural context and a story for you to remember them even better. So make sure you keep watching. To introduce each verb, I'm going to show you a short video clip so that you can associate it with the context in which it can be used. So without further ado, let's have a look at our first clip. Do you ever make to-do lists? My wife does. Whenever we're going on a trip, she will make a long list and then put a tick next to every object she puts in our suitcase. In other words, she is going to tick off every object on her list. Tick off is a great phrasal verb which you can use in the context of lists whenever you draw a tick or even a cross next to the item on the list. It doesn't only have to be related to actually physically drawing a tick next to something. It can simply mean completing a task. So I can say, I still need to tick off a few tasks. Or, she forgot to tick it off. Notice that tick off is a separable phrasal verb. This means that we can separate the verb and the object with a pronoun. If you're not sure how separable phrasal verbs work, then do have a look at Verb It Up 1, where we discussed this concept. You'll find the link in the description. And speaking about not forgetting to do things, I don't like lists very much. Unlike my wife, I'm much more of a post-it guy, like the woman from our next video. Have a look. Now, I don't know about you, but I just love sticking post-its around my house. In other words, I love putting them up. Whenever we stick a message to a wall, we can say we put it up. It doesn't have to be a message or a post-it note, it can really be anything from objects to putting things up electronically on the internet. So for example, we can say, let me put that number up on my screen. Or, she put up an ad to sell it. Again, put up is a separable phrasal verb, and we can put a pronoun or an object between the verb and the preposition. So just as you can put things up to remember them, you can then also remove them. In other words, you can take them down. Take down is another very useful phrasal verb, which is the exact opposite of put up. Again, when we take things down, it can be a message, an object, or something that we are removing from the internet. So for instance, I can say, we need to take this painting down. Or, shall we take all these post-its down? So, have you ever had to take down a post from your YouTube or your Instagram account? Let's have a look at our phrasal verb number 4, which also happens to be separable. Have a look at the clip. So the man in the video clearly finished something. Judging by his reaction, it must have taken him quite a long time and a lot of effort to do. In other words, we can say he finished it off. To finish off is a great phrasal verb which we can use in the context of finishing tasks that require effort and time. So for instance, I can say, I hope to finish this off today. Or, will you be able to finish it off? Now you may be asking yourself, what is the difference between finish off and finish something? Well, in fact, there's hardly any difference. Both verbs can be used interchangeably, but finish off is used for emphasis. It usually means that the task we have finished was long, required effort, and we're not going to come back to doing it ever again. So, what kind of tasks are you looking forward to finishing off these days? Before you think about it, let's have a look at another phrasal verb. In this video, we saw a young guy visiting a relative. Was she expecting him? No. In other words, we can say he just turned up. Turn up is a great natural phrasal verb which can be used in the context of coming to a place or attending an event. For example, I can say, no one expected her to turn up at the party. Or, only a few people turned up to the meeting. Notice that if you put an object after turn up, you need to use at or to after the verb. Let's look at another video clip. In this video, we saw a woman who clearly needed a rest. In other words, she needed to lie down. To lie down is a great phrasal verb which we can use in the context of relaxation. So, for instance, I can say, I need a moment to lie down. Or, I was so tired I had to lie down. Note that lie down is only used in the context of short rests. So next time you do something demanding and you feel like resting for a while, just make a sentence with lie down and say, I'm sorry, I need a few moments to lie down. Well, I hope you don't need to lie down anytime soon and you're ready for the next phrasal verb. Have a look. So when was the last time you had a meeting with your friends? Were you expecting to have a good time? Personally, whenever I meet my friends, I expect to have a great time, and nearly always these expectations are fulfilled. In other words, I can say that these meetings live up to my expectations. Live up to is a great phrasal verb that we can use in the context of expectations. So I can say, the food didn't live up to my expectations. Or, did the film live up to your expectations? So next time, instead of saying meet, fulfill, or satisfy expectations, which are all very formal expressions, use live up to. Now for the next video, let me introduce my friend Chantel. Chantel is a manager at a medium-sized company, and she's in charge of planning marketing campaigns. She normally plans these very carefully and puts a lot of thought into how to plan them. Once she has made her decision, she is very unlikely to change her mind about it. This is how she normally reacts when one of her team members suggests changes to her plans. So as you can see, Chantel is definitely not interested in changing her plans. In other words, she wants to stick to her original idea. To stick to is a great phrasal verb which you can use instead of the verb to follow. So I can say, we need to stick to procedures here. Or, it's really hard to stick to a diet. Remember that stick to is an irregular verb, so you should use its past and past participle forms correctly. So when was the last time you had to stick to something you didn't like a diet, rules at work, or traffic regulations? Why don't you make your own examples? And in the meantime, let's have a look at another phrasal verb.
And I don't want to sound like a bummer, and I don't want to make you feel bad.
How would you react if your partner told you that they had lied to you about something? Whenever we talk about confessing to something, we can use the verb to own up, which is much more natural and less formal. For example, we can say, "He'll never own up to that fraud." Or, "You should always own up to your errors." Notice that if you put an object after own up, you need to use the preposition to just before it. To own up to something. 2 more verbs to go. Let's have a look at the first one. It's pretty obvious what happened here, right? The woman was peeling a potato and she cut her finger. In other words, we can say that she ended up cutting her finger. End up is an extremely common phrasal verb that we can use in the context of consequences or results of something that has happened. For instance, I can say, "I ended up hurting my back yesterday." Or, "You'll end up in court for this one day." Notice that if you use a verb after end up, it's always going to be a gerund. Also, remember that end up and end are 2 very different words in English, so try not to end up making a mistake when you use them. And for our last verb, let me introduce Jamil to you. Jamil is an IT technician who works at a big multinational company. He has just finished his first year at the company and he has had his performance review. Needless to say, he is expecting a pay rise and he has just received an email from the human resources. Let's see how he reacts to what they told him. Well, clearly he liked the news, didn't he? It probably didn't only live up to his expectations, but also exceeded them. In other words, we can say it turned out to be even better than he expected. Turn out is a very natural phrasal verb which we use in the context of something that has surprising or unexpected results. So, for instance, I can say, "The weather turned out to be bad." Or, "It turned out she wasn't an IT expert." Notice that turn out can be followed by 2 different grammar structures. On the one hand, we can use it with an infinitive. The weather turned out to be bad. On the other hand, we can use it with a that clause. It turned out that she wasn't an IT expert. If you have any problems with that, it's really worth practicing these structures with turn out. And speaking of practice, remember that you can download a full summary of all the verbs from this video plus exercises from the link in the description below. And if this video is bringing you any value or teaching you anything useful in English, make sure you click that subscribe button so that you don't miss any of our future content. And if you're not ready for that type of commitment yet, do like the video as it gives me feedback and lets me know that I'm doing a reasonably good job teaching you English. And now let's practice these phrasal verbs in context. Your task is to replace the words in bold in the sentence I'm showing to you with one of the phrasal verbs that we have studied. Let's do the first one together. Have a look. We're talking about having a short rest here, right? So do you remember the phrasal verb we use in order to say that we need a short rest? If you're thinking about lie down, you're completely right. I'm a bit tired. I'm going to lie down a little. Now that you know how this exercise works, let me show you another example. Have a look. In here, we're talking about consequences and results. What phrasal verb do you use to express this meaning? If you're thinking of end up, you're completely right. He drove too fast and ended up paying a fine. Next. Do you remember my wife making lists and putting ticks next to the items that she had already put in the cases? What's the preposition you use with tick if you want to use it in the context of completing tasks? Tick off. I need to tick off a few things before my holidays. Let's have a look at another example. In here, we're talking about visiting a place or arriving somewhere. What phrasal verb from this video can you use to express this meaning? To turn up, right? We didn't expect him to turn up at the meeting. We could also say, we didn't expect him to turn up to the meeting. Both at and to are correct. Another example. And now it's the context of confession. Which phrasal verb from today can you remember that we can use in the context of confessing to something? If you're thinking of own up, then you were completely right. Surprisingly, she owned up to the crime. Let's have a look at a few more examples. In here, we're talking about expectations. And there's this one very natural verb that we can use when we're talking about fulfilling, meeting, or satisfying expectations. Do you remember which one it was? To live up to. Did the food live up to your expectations? I hope it did. Let's have a look at another example. So what's the phrasal verb that we use in the meaning of following, procedures, instructions, something that somebody tells us to do? To stick to. We need to stick to the guidelines carefully. 2 more to go. Let's have a look at the next example. In here, we're talking about uploading electronic content. Do you remember the phrasal verb we can use in this context? It's the same one we use for post-it notes when we stick them to walls. To put up. She's put up some great videos recently. And finally, our last example today. Have a look. So do you remember the opposite to put up? If you're thinking of take down, then you're completely right. This poster is offensive. We need to take it down. Well done. And now, after this little exercise, we're ready to experience these verbs in a broader context, through a story. Listen and see if you can recognize how these phrasal verbs are used in the context. When I studied computer engineering at university, I vividly remember staying at my best friend's place to finish off joint projects. I would normally turn up at around 9 in the evening after finishing my part-time job. I was working at a local bar, and by the time I got to my friend's place in the evenings, I was so tired that all I could think of was lie down and sleep. But there was no chance of that. Our degree was one of the best ones in the country, and we always had a deadline or two waiting for us to meet. As top students on our year, we not only wanted to live up to our lecturers' high expectations, but also to exceed them. This often involved thinking outside of the box, and our professors always pushed us to try something new rather than stick to our comfort zones. One evening, we were doing a project on cybersecurity, and trying to be creative, we decided to hack into our university's website and leave a message there for anyone who would visit the website in the morning. It was not an easy thing to do, but with our skills and a bit of time, we managed to access the university site and put up a message on the home screen. Zombies are coming. Prepare. I have to admit it wasn't the best example of our creativity, but it was only meant to be an innocent joke. In the end, though, it turned out very differently. The next day, everyone at the university was talking about this, only it was not in the way we expected. We'd thought that people would love our idea, but almost everyone was worried. We soon learned that what our little joke had done was expose one of the most prestigious universities in the country. It was about the university's reputation, and it was serious. We quickly decided to take the message down and then went to the dean to own up to what we'd done. Fortunately for us, while the dean was very shocked and angry, she understood we'd had no bad intention. To cut a long story short, we ended up apologizing publicly for what we'd done and vowing solemnly not to do anything similar in the future. Well done! Were you able to understand all the phrasal verbs used in the story? I definitely hope so. Please let me know in the comments below which of the phrasal verbs from today turned out to be the most useful one for you. Now, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, that would be the right moment to do so. And if you have another 10 minutes to learn more English, why don't you click one of these 2 videos and I'll see you right there. Take care, keep learning, and enjoy the process. Thank you very much for watching.